my great pleasure to be here with you at the Middle East Rail Conference in Dubai. It's wonderful to see so many stakeholders gathered here in order to share experiences and ideas. Dubai is really an appropriate setting to talk about developing infrastructure for the future. You have managed to focus on your strengths and focused on building modern infrastructure that is also at the same time laying the basis for a strong and competitive transport sector and a competitive economy. However, there are challenges in developing infrastructure. Many of these challenges are similar both in the Middle East and also in Europe. Working together would seem to be a logical step in overcoming common issues, especially given the road Europe has traveled to become one of the world leaders in the rail sector. As regions, we have plenty to learn from each other. That is why I'm so pleased to be here among you today. I'm also very pleased to share the European experience, and I'm also happy to see so many European stakeholders present here today. It shows that the contacts between our businesses are well advancing, and I also hope to extend this to the government level and deepen regulatory cooperation. I'm coming here from Riyadh, where I had very good talks with the Saudi Arabian authorities, but where we also held a very successful conference about rail issues together with the GCC Secretariat, and I'm very grateful for that cooperation to them. And it also shows our very strong commitment to the region. Let me underline that as policymakers, our overarching focus must be on improving our transport networks to meet every increasing demand for transport, as well as ensuring our companies, products and services remain at the same time competitive in the global market. First, I would like to look at the development of rail in the European Union to date. Secondly, I'll say a few words on current EU policy in developing rail. And thirdly, although I do not have a crystal ball to predict the future, there are issues and challenges that need to be looked at when developing the transport for future. European Union has a long and proud history in the rail sector dating back to the 1800s. The nations that make up Europe have traditionally built their very own successful rail networks. The downside in this early adoption of rail is that the network infrastructure, rolling stock, and regulatory environment were not always so interoperable when it came to creating a truly integrated single European rail area, and we are not there yet. We have managed to develop significant high-speed rail lines across the continent, such as Thalys, the DGV, or the ICE train services. Concerning technical aspects, in the early 90s, there were 20 or so different signaling systems on European railways. 20. These signaling systems are fundamental to safe train travel, but they were seldom interoperable. With encouragement of the EU, major rail projects were launched to promote train travel, particularly high-speed network and transnational freight services. During the implementation of these projects, it became clear that it was essential for European railways to harmonize the existing national signaling systems. So the EU set about developing world-leading technologies in terms of safety and signaling. And as we well know, safety always is the most important thing that comes first. The EU ERTMS, the European Rail Traffic Management System, is the world's most efficient and advanced train signaling system and has the potential to be used worldwide. And we can see it already also being used in the Middle Eastern area. The system was developed following an intense 10-year phase of research and development. Since 2005, feedback from projects prompted the need to fine-tune the specifications in order to move from local to global compatibility and ensure interoperability between all projects in Europe. When there are many countries involved, when there are border crossings involved, interoperability becomes one of the most important features for seamless movement. ERTMS is now being progressively deployed along the main European rail routes. This will reduce running costs and improve the system's efficiency on long cross-border distances. We have ambitious objective for the deployment of ERTMS across key freight corridors and high-speed lines, which will greatly improve also the competitiveness of European railways. Although the technology required a lot of time and money, it was necessary in order to create a fully interoperable network. There is also growing international demand for the take-up of ERTMS in regions outside the EU, and we are more than happy to share our experience, knowledge, and the technology with you. To ease congestion and with a view to reducing emissions, the EU has set key targets concerning shifting a substantial part of passenger and freight transport from other modes of transport to rail. So far, we have unfortunately mixed results. Since 2003, the modal share of passenger rail has increased from 5.8% to 6.6%, relatively modest increase. Road carries about 80% of passengers, while air has a 9% share of the passenger market in the EU. That really shows how much potential there still exists for rail on the passenger services. On freight, EU also wants to shift medium and long distance freight from roads to rail. To date, success on freight has also been very limited. Rail freight's share has remained at around 10% for the last 15 years. Road freight holds 50% of the market and 30% of the market is maritime. One should also say that these are EU-wide figures. It varies across the member states, how member states have been much more successful internally in moving more freight on rail. But of course, when it comes to crossing the borders, it becomes a challenge and also an impediment. On rail freight, really, there is room to do more. 80% of the freight transport in the EU is cross-border, and there where seamless border crossing comes into the picture. And not only that, but also what I talked about before, the interoperability. And technical solutions. Technical solutions such as the ERTMS are a very good start. But other measures, such as a good regulatory environment and new investments, are equally as important as we strive to create a single European rail area in order to replicate the success Europe has had when it created the single European aviation market in the 1990s. So a series of measures are still needed to improve rail's market share in both freight and passenger transport in order to create that single European rail area I just now mentioned. And we are trying, in order to do that, we're also trying to finalize a project called the Fourth Railway Package. This is a plan which contains a series of measures to dismantle the remaining technical, administrative and regulatory barriers which are hampering the growth of rail, especially on cross-border routes in the EU. And it's also important to move ahead, not according to the lowest common denominator, but also to have a much higher ambition. We also expect this to become European legislation soon, and we are confident of replicating the European success we had in aviation, also in the rail sector, even though it will take a little bit more time to get there. But we have to maintain focus, and we have to be also optimistic, but supportive at the same time. In terms of sharing of experiences, as I said at the outset, one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here today is to be able to share with you our experiences in developing a rail network that is, or should be, fully interoperable. I have no doubt that as you embark on building your network within the GCC countries, you can learn from the EU experience. We are, after all, the only two regions in the world building transnational high-speed rail networks. The EU has had many successes, but many failings too. And if I could give one piece of advice as you build your network, make sure you work together and build together. The experience of Europe has shown that building a rail network nationally can be easier and quicker, but that retrofitting it afterwards to make it interoperable can be very costly and time-consuming. Remember that alone we move quickly, but together we move further. Think about that very carefully in these early phases of your rail construction, which I'm sure will be a great success. But I also know that it's not going to be a success that's going to be achieved easily. And there are a lot of challenges to tackle. Now a couple of words about programs, policies and plans, what the EU is undertaking to develop transport infrastructure. In both the Middle East and Europe, we have limited physical land space, limited funds to invest, and the planet fast approaching its limits. We can and we must accommodate rising demand for passenger and freight transport, but we have to be clever in how we plan to develop capacity. The EU is working on a number of plans to try to A, maximize investment amounts by mixing public and private funds, B, maximize the return or benefit on that investment by having targeted and coordinated plans, C, ensure we continue to be at the forefront of new rail technologies by continuing our research programs, and D, to ensure we consider the environment when increasing transport capacity. Being sustainable is very important. At the same time, it is also the license to grow we get if we are sustainable. Concerning innovative investment sources, European Commission launched 2014 a very ambitious investment plan. The key idea is to match leverage private money for strategic infrastructure projects, which are needed for jobs and growth in the European Union. This is known as blending. In short, the new fund means that projects which might otherwise be too risky for private investors alone can go ahead, creating jobs in the process and meeting the demand for increased capacity in the transport network. The key idea is to leverage private money for strategic infrastructure projects which are needed for jobs and growth. The fund has a total value of 315 billion euros, and the new fund means that projects which really would be otherwise too risky could go ahead. And also, at the same time, trying to meet the growing demand for increased transport capacity. The EU has targeted and coordinated infrastructure cross-border planning programs. For us, this is a very important thing, and also when you move to the cross-border cooperation, then it also is an important thing to bear in mind. The largest of such of the programs we have is a Trans-European Network for Transport program. This consists of 9 core corridors. A great deal of planning is going into the development of these 9 corridors to ensure the best possible return on investment. For far too long, the EU's transport infrastructure has been a patchwork rather than a network. Under this program, 70% of all EU transport financing in the current year's cycle will go to rail. So, as you can see, we are also very much prioritizing the public investments on the European level to support the rail sector. And this is also very much needed in order to make sure we do have more goods on rail and to have more people who would be using rail networks. Europe is also the world market leader in developing new solutions for rail. The EU has established now, as a new thing, a joint undertaking called Shift to Rail. This is almost 1 billion euro public-private partnership to manage rail research and innovation efforts in the EU to increase the quality and reliability of the rail services. We plan to remain at the forefront of rail innovation to ensure we continue our tradition of leading the field in manufacturing, infrastructure development, traffic management, and regulatory excellence. And when we talk about the manufacturing or traffic management, we have already today seen so many European participants at this fair, and the products that they show are really very competitive on a global scale. We must also be conscious of climate change. The EU's energy union policy aims to ensure Europe has affordable and climate-friendly energy. In the EU, transport represents 32% of the CO2 emissions. The development of rail is important, as it is one of the most environmentally friendly and sustainable modes of transport. We also want that our citizens will have a cleaner air and less noise, and these are, of course, challenges that we are facing in developing any of the transport network programs. Future challenges and trends. Looking at the future, it's my firm belief that technology is the game changer in allowing us to develop a safe, secure and sustainable transport network. And its role is set to increase. Already, technology is changing our transport network. Whether it is real-time information on traffic or an app to tell us when the next train is due, change is afoot. And I'm very much believing that the technology companies which are developing very fast will continuously come up with new solutions. But in order to be able to do that, they also have to have access to the vast data which is generated. And of course there you have other elements which comes into picture, like also the issues related to the privacy and data protection. But what we see is really just the beginning. In the medium to long term, technology and smart mobility, as well as a more connected, integrated network, will be and should be the backbone of transport. As I said, data is what some people refer to as the new gold. To exploit its potential, an effective regulatory environment will also have to be developed in going forward. Using data effectively will be central to the development of a smarter, more efficient, multimodal transport network. However, as data and technology become more central to our transport networks, the need to focus on new threats like cybersecurity becomes even greater for three main reasons. First, to ensure our transport network remains safe as possible. Secondly, to ensure privacy of individuals' data and to gain the public's confidence. They often are also the ultimate source of data. And third, to ensure our transport network is not attacked by hackers interfering with the potential cause chaos, physical terrorism may become also cyber terrorism. Cybersecurity is really an important issue when we are continuing to develop the technology, and the issue that we cannot afford to sidetrack in transport. I'm confident that by working together, we can meet these challenges and trends head-on and exploit the potential of technology and data for the benefit of our people and for our business communities. Speaking of other challenges, I cannot omit that sadly also terrorism and security are issues to be considered when building transport networks for the future, be it here in the Middle East, European Union, or any other region in the world. The attempted attacks on one of Europe's high-speed rail lines last August brought this into sharp focus. Better training, intelligence, and information sharing across borders and regions is crucial in tackling this global threat that can be only tackled together. At present, there are no EU-wide rules on rail security, although a study is underway and due to be published in the autumn this year. Our response must be effective, but remain proportionate to the threat faced. We must maintain the seamless flow of passengers and at the same time increase the level of security. This is a serious challenge that we are facing. Let me come to the conclusion. Your Excellencies, dear participants, the EU is ready and willing and experienced partner for the Middle East region and also for the North African region and other regions in the world when it comes to building a successful transnational rail network. The European model in rail can serve as a model for other regions trying to develop cross-border rail networks. Europe is already the world's largest rail supply market. We would be happy to work with you into the future. Yes, there are challenges, but we are together stronger, and we can tackle also these issues together. The door of the EU is open to you, and I hope we can cooperate and learn from each other on many projects into the future. This was also the spirit I experienced yesterday when having the rail seminar in GCC Secretariat premises, and the very good interest and willingness to work together. So let's move together and quickly if possible. I thank you for your time this morning, and I look forward for the rest of the day. I'm sure it is going to be a huge success, and I very much thank you for having been invited to address you at this conference. Thank you very much. It's my understanding as well that I'm ready to take a couple of questions.
Yes, if any of our audience have a question, kindly raise your hand and we'll get you a mic. I have a question, yes? Henrik, you mentioned that this region could learn from Europe's mistakes. What is the most important lesson that you would like our audience to take away from the Europe's experience?
Thank you very much for the question. It's definitely a tough one, but I'm trying to explain. I think that in my presentation, I also tried to point out a number of elements which we should undertake, and also what you can learn from us. But let me just try to come up with a couple of key words here. I think an extremely important issue is the interoperability. And there are certain advantages that you have compared to Europe from the point of view that Europe, as I said, had already a well-developed national rail networks with their own ways of operating. And trying to put that together into a single European rail area of 28 member states has been far more of a challenge that when you start from, let's say, mostly with new projects and new ideas, and having also the possibility to move together at the same time. But when you do that, then please, my suggestion is put the interoperability at the very heart of the activities that you are undertaking. That also means that the common standards, and also there has to be incentives to implement these standards. And today's world, there are already so many good examples where you can actually build on the existing standards. This is not about inventing the bicycle. There are a lot of good bicycles, and you can just start pedaling when you have chosen the one that is most fit for you. Another element which is important is, and that is also, I understand, part of the wider political cooperation and developing the GCC market, which of course is the issue of customs and the issue of border crossing procedures. Because even with the best interoperability and with the most similar standards, you could be facing situations where trains are stopping on the borders if there is no agreement of how to handle the cargo that is on it or how to handle the people which are on it. That is something which is also very clearly a key element for the success of any cross-border rail networks. Then another European aspect which we have observed is that member states are very keen to develop their rail systems within their territory. And the member states which are adjacent to each other do it in their territories. But where they are less keen to focus are the border crossings. And if you focus on making sure that the cross-border sections are prioritized, and because they form actually the links to the network, then that also helps to move forward, and is something that we have been struggling in Europe in particular from the point of view of the investments, because there is much less interest from the national side to invest on the border crossing than invest in your own territory. And maybe the last thing to mention is that we have, as I also said in my presentation, we have set up now a joint undertaking to look at the research and innovation in the rail area. But it's only now in the last 18 months that it has been set up, and it has not really started to function in its entirety. The earlier you can also do together set up something which also is looking at the innovation. Innovation in that area is something which definitely can benefit you and can benefit the rail community, but more importantly, the people and the businesses around the region. So in Europe there is a lot of positive stories. There is a very strong rail industry that I'm very proud of as European. But of course, we have made also a number of mistakes, and we are here to share our experience with you so that you can avoid them and draw your own conclusions. Thank you very much.
Right, Henrik, we have one more question, I believe. Yes? No, at the back. We have time only for one single question. It's in the back. We're going to take it.
Hi, it's Ayman Abu Talib from Roads and Transport Authority, Dubai. I just have a question asking about how do you measure sustainability in Mobility and Transport European Commission? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, sustainability, obviously, you can have different aspects to measure it. For us, the very important element is related to the environmental impact, and if I must say, I would say also to the environmental footprint, because we really need to make more efforts in Europe to reduce the emissions that are coming from the transport sector. And we don't only do it because we believe that it is important to cut the emissions in the global scale, which we very much do and pursue on the global level, and which are also in the spirit of the discussions in COP21. But we also do it because it's good for our citizens, it's also boosting innovation, and it is good for railways at the same time as well, because of all the other transport modes, railways are the ones which can really bring more benefits to the environmental performance and at the same time also reducing the CO2 footprint as such. Electrification is an important element on that, and these are the aspects that we take into account while trying to see the sustainability of the different transport networks. Thank you very much. I again wish you a very good conference, and thank you for your attention.